Did you know that in North Korea, there are only 28 government-approved hairstyles, 18 for women and 10 for men? Anything else is strictly forbidden. For men, your hair has to be at least a centimeter long, but no more than 5. The government actually recommends a haircut every 2 weeks to maintain this ideal look. But here's the twist: the leader, Kim Jong-un, didn't include his own unique hairstyle on the approved list. He wanted it to be one of a kind. If anyone dares to copy it, they could face severe punishment. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to North Korea's unusual laws. They have only 3 state-run TV channels. Reading, listening to, or watching foreign media is almost impossible. When a leader appears in public, you are required to show emotion. It sounds like something out of a surreal movie, doesn't it? Here we are in the 21st century, with the internet giving us access to any information we want. Yet half the people in North Korea have no idea how freely the rest of the world lives. The DPRK is known as the most isolated state on earth. But some people have managed to get in. For example, Ukrainian journalist Roman Bakal made an hour-long film about life there, covering everything from his stay to the culture. He even detailed how the special services control every single step. He said no matter how fast he ran, his guide was always right behind him, never leaving his side. North Korea's intelligence agency is a whole different breed of government entity. On one hand, they enforce their leaders' bizarre orders, like controlling haircuts or dictating which sports are allowed. On the other, they manage the laws of punishment, control who crosses the borders, guard state secrets, and even organize covert operations in other countries. It's a unique, highly secretive service. And their most peculiar trait: unlike agents in many other authoritarian regimes, these people are not for sale. They work for an idea and are ready to carry out any order, any task, in any situation. This regime has been in place since 1948. You can't buy them, you can't recruit them, and you can't convince them that there's another way to live. They are known as the main intelligence agency, or in short, they are GB. In this video, I'm going to tell you the history of North Korea's special services. You'll learn how Kim Jong-il, inspired by more than just James Bond movies, created a spy agency where every agent could rival a fictional super spy. We'll explore how these services took resources from people all over the world and why they did it. We'll look at the 3-generation rule and why breaking the law in North Korea is a risk you ever want to take. We'll find out why foreign radio broadcasts are jammed and how Kim Jong-un, once seen as the country's hope for a more open future, became one of the strictest leaders in the world. If you find this interesting, please support this video with a like or a comment. After World War II, Korea, which had been a Japanese colony since 1910, was divided along the 38th parallel. The North fell under Soviet control, and the South under American control. This decision was made without any input from the Korean people themselves. American historian Michael Robinson writes that the two superpowers simply decided to split the territory into 2 occupation zones. So, in 1948, 2 countries were born on the Korean peninsula, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Republic of Korea. The plan was that, eventually, the 2 countries would reunite. But this was the Cold War, and the US and the USSR couldn't agree on how that would happen. The UN stepped in, taking responsibility for the future of the peninsula. And what did they do? Essentially, nothing. They didn't achieve anything, didn't control the situation, and completely missed the moment when Kim Il-sung started organizing his special services. He was preparing the country for a great war. Both Koreas wanted to conquer the other and expand their influence. This led to the creation of the General Staff Department of the DPRK. This special service spied on South Koreans and the Japanese. Their duties even included overseeing the education of future party members. The borders of North Korea were sealed by these very agents, watching to ensure no one escaped. They transformed the country into a massive, closed system with a population of over 9 million people. In just 1 year, by 1949, the DPRK had managed to crush all dissident movements and opposition. There was a clear reason for this. Kim Il-sung planned to march on Seoul, And he couldn't have people criticizing his strategy. So, by 1949, his newly formed special services had established total control. It happened incredibly fast. Thanks to intense pressure and intimidation, the DPRK had a brutal system of punishment and discipline. One method involved forcing people to sit with their legs crossed and back straight for 16 to 18 hours a day. Moving was forbidden. If a prisoner collapsed, they were punished. And punishment was the best-case scenario. The worst was immediate, public execution. It was a terrifying way to keep the population on a short leash. Having dealt with all internal dissent, in June 1950, 75,000 DPRK soldiers crossed the 38th parallel and invaded the Republic of Korea. This was the start of the Korean War. It lasted for 3 years, until 1953. It was a relatively short war, but an absolute tragedy. Nearly 5 million people died, and everyone was affected. In terms of civilian casualties, the Korean War is considered even more devastating than World War II and the Vietnam War. In late July 1950, the warring parties signed a truce, and a buffer zone emerged right along the 38th parallel. A demilitarized zone. But in reality, both countries are still technically at war. So, let's travel back in time to the 1950s and 60s, under the rule of Kim Il-sung. While he was busy with foreign policy, everything happening inside the country was managed by his son, Kim Jong-il. He was a man with a deep fascination for the work of intelligence agencies. It was Kim Jong-il who championed laws forbidding citizens from listening to, reading, or watching foreign content. He knew that if people learned they could live differently, the entire system would be at risk of collapsing. So, he instituted laws with severe punishments, making it impossible for such materials to enter the DPRK. Anyone caught red-handed was either thrown in prison or simply disappeared, depending on the severity of their crime. But this ban on foreign content applied to everyone except, you guessed it, Kim Jong-il himself. He absolutely loved foreign cinema. In fact, he drew inspiration from it. Researcher Paul Fisher, in his book A Kim Jong-il Production, writes that he watched almost everything: Japanese blockbusters, adult films, gangster movies. He loved Hollywood and Bollywood, paying special attention to films about Rocky and James Bond. The James Bond films, in particular, shaped his entire idea of how secret services should operate. He genuinely believed that Western agencies worked exactly as they did in the movies. And he would later try to bring that cinematic vision to life, for instance, by abducting foreigners to recruit them or to learn their skills. The DPRK's special services at the time were essentially a copy of James Bond, just without the fancy cars, tuxedos, and cool gadgets, but with a very strong dose of communist ideology. And in some ways, he actually managed to pull off these super-secret missions in his own life. Starting in August 1971, the first attempts to end the war between the DPRK and the Republic of Korea began. They tried to establish some kind of dialogue or relationship. After a year of negotiations, they actually agreed on 3 principles for the reunification of the Korean people. This was a document that opened the door to a gradual, peaceful reunification without outside interference. What's fascinating is that this happened despite the huge ideological differences between the two countries. This agreement might have actually led somewhere if it weren't for the events in Burma. Now Myanmar, in 1983. DPRK Special Services planned to assassinate the President of the Republic of Korea along with his entire delegation. 3 officers, working undercover, arrived in the country and planted a bomb in the mausoleum where President Chun Doo-hwan and his delegation were scheduled to visit. The explosion killed more than 20 people. President Chun Doo-hwan himself was unharmed, as his car was delayed, and he arrived just 2 minutes after the blast. However, the attack claimed the lives of 4 South Korean government ministers. So it's hard to call it a complete failure from the DPRK's perspective, but this wasn't the only attempt by the DPRK to pressure or humiliate its southern neighbor. In 1988, Seoul was set to host the Summer Olympic Games. This was a massive event for the Republic of Korea, a golden opportunity to showcase its pro-democratic, pro-American stance and present itself to the world as an open state. For its northern neighbor, however, this was a catastrophe. Kim Jong-il had insisted that the Olympics should be held jointly in both Koreas, which was obviously impossible. No one wanted to associate with an authoritarian country, especially after the assassination attempt on the president. The international community's response was clear and firm: the Games would be held in Seoul. Period. So, North Korea devised another plan. If they couldn't host the Games, they could at least tarnish the event. They decided to organize a boycott. To make their point, agents planted a bomb on a passenger plane. The timer was set to go off just as the aircraft flew over Seoul. This horrific attack took the lives of 115 people. And to some extent, Kim Jong-il succeeded in persuading some countries to boycott the Olympic Games. 7 nations, including Ethiopia, Cuba, Albania, and Vietnam, refused to participate. But the United States, European countries, and even the Soviet Union still attended. So, the plan only partially worked. While North Korean leaders were busy trying to influence their neighbors, they didn't forget about repression within their own country. No nation had as many political prisoners as the DPRK. There are really only 2 ways out: by sea or by crossing treacherous mountain ranges. And even then, success is far from guaranteed. Some perish along the way, while others are caught by the special services. Getting caught is a terrifying prospect because of a policy known as 3-generation punishment. This rule means that when someone is caught, it's not just them who faces the consequences. Their entire family is punished, including to subsequent generations of children. Your grandparents and parents could also be affected. So, before breaking any law in the DPRK, people have to think very, very carefully. A single person's actions can threaten their entire family. This total control over the population has cultivated a state of genuine fear. You can even get a prison sentence and face intense interrogation just for speaking with foreigners. If the special services spot someone interacting with a foreign citizen, it immediately raises red flags. These people are instantly labeled as potential spies, traitors, or informants for Seoul. Yes, it sounds absurd and completely unreasonable, but this is how the DPRK tries to stop the flow of information out of the country. And it's the same method they use to prevent ideas from the Western world from seeping in. It's a well-oiled system of control that continues to operate to this very day. For a country to run like clockwork, any dissent must be crushed. Offenders are punished so severely they wouldn't dare dream of freedom. I was subjected to prolonged and varied pressure. They hurt me with objects, held me underwater. The worst was when they tied my hands behind my back and hoisted them up by 2 feet. I couldn't sit, stand, or rest. My body was constantly tense, completely immobilized. After a while, a sharp pain shot through my chest. I honestly thought I wouldn't make it. The work of North Korea's intelligence agents was split into several departments. 6 departments handled internal affairs, spies, informants, disciplinary units, and so on. There was a special office that operated exclusively in cyberspace. And then there was one department so secret, its existence was barely acknowledged. It's still unknown if it operates today. But from the early 50s to the 90s, agents from this department were engaged in the organized abduction of people from all over the world. This happened to be Kim Jong-il's favorite department. Although cases were recorded as early as 1953, the program officially ramped up in the late 70s. Undercover agents were sent to various countries: France, Japan, South Korea. Once there, they would lure individuals to remote areas and forcibly transport them to the DPRK. Very few ever managed to escape. They didn't just take anyone, though. They targeted people who could benefit the country: engineers, mathematicians, doctors, professors, and even actors. As you might know, Kim Jong-il was obsessed with cinema. So, let's start with one of the most famous stories. It's the story of South Korean director Shin Sang-ok and his wife, actress Choi Yoon-hee. They were a powerhouse couple whose production company created many films that brought international recognition to Seoul's film industry. The first to disappear was Choi Yoon-hee in January 1978. She was the bait to lure her husband. Undercover agents invited her to Hong Kong, offering her a film role. When she arrived, she was put on a ship and sent to Pyongyang. Interestingly, she was treated like an honored guest, living in unbelievable luxury. Choi Yoon-hee was given her own villa, taken to museums, and lectured on the life and achievements of Kim Jong-il. The leader himself would take her to the cinema, the opera, and various parties, eagerly listening to her opinions on different films. But no one told her she was a pawn in a much larger plan. When Choi Yoon-hee vanished, her husband, Shin Sang-ok, searched frantically for her, even though they were divorced at the time. His search led him to Hong Kong, where DPRK agents were waiting for him. The director was not so lucky. He was immediately taken into custody and subjected to intense pressure. He wasn't released until 1983, and it was only then that he saw Choi Yoon-hee again. From that moment, they began working together under Kim Jong-il's direct supervision. They were shown the leader's personal film library, which contained over 15,000 movies from around the world. The pair was forced to watch 4 films a day and write critiques. This went on until they finally agreed to make movies for the leader. They produced many films for him, but their most famous and expensive was Pulgasari, a North Korean reimagining of Godzilla. It wasn't until 1986 that the couple finally managed to escape the leader's bizarre film program. This program of abducting and detaining foreigners was, in many ways, a direct result of the country's extreme isolation. The leaders understood perfectly well that due to their own restrictions and rigid rules, their state couldn't develop or gain global influence on its own. So, many of their actions were aimed at bringing in new people to introduce new skills to the DPRK. Many who were taken were later used for intelligence activities. This whole saga of abduction operations began in the 50s with the mysterious disappearances of South Korean and Japanese fishing crews. By the 70s, it had become a part of the country's national policy. Statistics from 2010 show that the DPRK abducted a total of 3,835 people. Of those, only a small fraction ever returned to South Korea. About 88% of the abductees were taken to perform basic labor and to be used as propaganda, to show that the DPRK wasn't such a bad country. The remaining 12% were trained as intelligence assets. But these are old statistics, newer ones don't exist. Eventually, Kim Jong-il had to admit the program was ineffective, and it seemingly ceased its activities. Imagine this, in 2002, the then Prime Minister of Japan, Junichiro Koizumi, traveled to the DPRK, under intense public pressure. He went to receive a formal apology from Kim Jong-il for the abduction of Japanese citizens. This was an unprecedented step. Kim Jong-il had meticulously built a powerful cult of personality around himself. He was the all-powerful leader, and any disagreement with him had severe consequences. So, for him to apologize for kidnapping people was something truly unique in the country's history. Anyone who disagreed with the cult of personality, anyone who dared to question the leadership or express doubts about its legitimacy, eventually fell into the hands of the regime. They were sent to a vast system of labor camps scattered throughout the country, and this doesn't even count the lives lost. Despite all this, there were moments of hope. In January 1992, North and South Korea signed a declaration to free the peninsula from nuclear weapons. Both countries agreed not to produce, receive, store, or deploy nuclear-capable weapons on their territory. The leaders even agreed to mutual inspections to ensure compliance. It seemed like the situation was improving. Then, in June 2000, a historic inter-Korean summit was held, which further supported the improvement in relations between the two countries. But as we know, the path to peace is rarely straightforward. Things seem to be looking up. Trade, family reunifications, the world was hopeful. But then, just 2 years later, in December 2002, the DPRK announced it was restarting its nuclear programs and kicked out all UN inspectors. The agreement with South Korea was torn up. By 2005, Pyongyang officially declared they were building nuclear weapons for protection against the United States. And a year later, on October 9, 2006, they conducted their first successful test. And so it began. Sanctions, criticism, pressure, negotiations. It all became a tangled mess that only made the situation more confusing. With no real solution in sight, amidst this chaos, the DPRK reorganized its special services, creating a new, more powerful agency, the Main Intelligence Bureau, or RGB. These agents were far more decisive than their predecessors. For example, they immediately started trying to send operatives to the United States. This was tricky, of course, mainly because of their appearance. It wouldn't take long for Americans to get suspicious. So, Washington's adversaries had to get creative. They operated in two main ways: remotely, through cyberspace, and by recruiting people of Asian descent already in the United States. It seems this was a tactic also used by Chinese special services, who faced similar challenges in physically deploying agents to the U.S. In fact, China became a kind of mentor for the DPRK's special services, especially in training and organization. North Korea is a regime that has surrounded itself with a narrative of hostility and armed itself with nuclear missiles. While its leaders pursue this rigid policy, its citizens suffer. This state, and any who support it, represent a clear and present threat. Then came 2011. The great blockbuster lover, all-powerful leader of the DPRK, Kim Jong-il, passed away. The entire country wept at his funeral. The news spread like wildfire, as did the announcement of his successor, his son, Kim Jong-un. He wasn't even 30 when he took power. Some hoped he would be a reformer, a modernizer who would steer North Korea towards a more open path. After all, he'd studied in Switzerland, loved basketball, skiing, and movies. He was a fan of Michael Jordan and Jean-Claude Van Damme. But beneath that modern veneer was a character even more ruthless than his father's. It would be Kim Jong-un who would tighten the regime's grip on the country, where even minor infractions could lead to a person disappearing. And it would be under his leadership that the DPRK would threaten the world with nuclear war. His decisiveness was clear from day one. He had his own uncle removed from public life for merely questioning his ability to lead. The general in charge of nuclear tests was also removed after a failed warhead test. In February 2017, he even had his own half-brother eliminated. It happened in the corridor of the Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Operatives recruited two women, one from India and the other from Vietnam, who approached the man. They did, applying a toxic substance to his face. He died shortly after. While no one officially claimed responsibility, the removal of Kim Jong-un's relative caused a major diplomatic scandal and led to the closure of the DPRK's embassy in Malaysia, one of the few countries where they had one. Researchers explain Kim Jong-un's severity quite simply. He was raised in military traditions from childhood. On his 8th birthday, little Kim was given honorary badges, and all officers were ordered to greet and address him as a future commander. His father was grooming him for leadership from a very young age. Still, no one anticipated just how harsh a ruler he would become. In 2020, media reported that he ordered a ship captain to be executed for listening to Radio Free Asia. And he did it publicly, in front of hundreds of other captains, as a chilling warning of what happens to those who break the law. It was Kim Jong-un who became the face of a regime the world would fiercely criticize. Now, let's talk more about that Special Services Department, the RGB. Although it appeared in the 90s, it's considered one of the most effective in the world. But it's impossible to verify or confirm any of this information because North Korea is such a closed-off society. Today, their duties go beyond traditional espionage. They're involved in hacking, monitoring citizens, and blocking foreign signals. They use every method available to stop what they call hostile ideologies from spreading within their country. It's a closed digital state. But even with all their efforts, they can't stop smugglers. They can block the internet, but it's impossible to stop the spread of physical media like DVDs or USB drives. Researchers report that about half the country's population has seen foreign films, listen to foreign music, or read foreign books at least once. This fact alone points to a significant inefficiency in their special services. Under Kim Jong-un, North Korea's special services aren't just about control and intelligence, they're also involved in major illegal operations. Between 2017 and 2018, they reportedly stole over $500 million in digital currencies through cyber attacks. And so far, no one has been able to stop them. Their network is closed. And no one has managed to successfully penetrate the DPRK's information space. Nuclear weapons are a whole other story. It's no secret that the DPRK is constantly building up its nuclear potential. They've been doing it for years. Official estimates suggest the leadership has around 20 warheads. The special services play a crucial role here. They are responsible for keeping the development of their nuclear missiles completely confidential. And it seems they're succeeding, because nobody really knows how many warheads they actually have. The reason for this secrecy is logical. The Pyongyang leadership has seen how the United States reacts to nuclear weapons and authoritarian regimes. They've watched the situation with Iran and know that Washington, working with European partners, could try to restrict their nuclear activities. So, North Korean leaders and their special services constantly talk about the threat of nuclear confrontation and their readiness for it. But they never reveal the true power or quantity of their arsenal. The North Korean special services are a very strange phenomenon. In the intelligence community, they're sometimes called pocket agents because, in addition to their major global operations, they also carry out unusual orders, like controlling what people search for online. However, this doesn't make them any less dangerous. This is a dictatorship, ready for radical actions to expand its ideology. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. Give it a like or a dislike, leave a comment, and share this video. And please, be sure to subscribe to the channel to help it grow.